The morning sun beat down on Officer James Reeves as he sat in his patrol car, sipping lukewarm coffee from a travel mug his daughter had given him last Christmas. The words "world's best dad" had started to fade after countless washings. He smiled at the memory of her excited face as he'd unwrapped it. Reeves had been with the Millfield Police Department for 20 years now. Not the biggest force, not the smallest. Just a decent-sized department in a decent-sized town where most folks knew each other, at least by sight. He'd grown up here, watched the town change, seen businesses come and go, neighborhoods rise and fall. His radio crackled with routine updates as he finished the last of his coffee. He'd been assigned to monitor the school zone on Elm Street, where parents had been complaining about speeders putting kids at risk. Nothing exciting, just another Tuesday. He checked his watch, 8:45 a.m. The morning rush was almost over. Just as he was about to call in for a new assignment, a black SUV with government plates flew past him, easily doing 50 in the 25-mile-per-hour zone. Reeves didn't hesitate. He flipped on his lights and siren and pulled out, following the vehicle. The SUV continued for another block before finally pulling over. Tinted windows polished to a mirror shine, government plates that he recognized as federal issue. Reeves felt a twinge of unease but pushed it aside. Didn't matter who they were. Nobody had the right to endanger kids. He approached cautiously, hand resting near his holster as procedure demanded. 20 years on the force had taught him that routine stops were sometimes the most dangerous. He tapped on the driver's window with his knuckle, noting the 3 occupants inside. The window slid down with an expensive-sounding hum, revealing a stone-faced driver in a black suit. "License and registration," Reeves said, keeping his tone professional. "We're on official business," the driver replied. "Not making a move toward any documents, I understand. Sir, but you were doing 50 in a school zone. I need to see your license and registration." The back window rolled down and a man with silver-streaked hair and an expensive suit leaned forward. "Do you know who I am, officer?" The voice carried the easy confidence of someone used to being obeyed. Reeves bent slightly to look at the man, maintaining a respectful but firm demeanor. "No, sir, I don't. But I do know you were in a vehicle going twice the speed limit in a school zone full of children." The man's eyebrows shot up in surprise, as if he couldn't believe his identity wasn't immediately recognized. "I'm William Morrison, the Attorney General of the United States." He held up an identification badge. "We're late for a meeting at the federal courthouse. Now, if you'll excuse us." Reeves felt a cold shock run through him. William Morrison. The same William Morrison who'd been on TV last week, announcing federal budget cuts that had cost Reeves's younger brother his job at the Postal Service. The same William Morrison who'd dismissed concerns about the impact on working families as necessary sacrifices. "I'll still need to see the driver's license and registration, Mr. Attorney General," Reeves said, his voice slightly tighter than before. "It's standard procedure." Morrison's face darkened. "Officer, perhaps I'm not making myself clear. We are on official business for the Department of Justice. Surely you can use some discretion here." The third man in the car, sitting on the passenger side, leaned forward. "We have a security detail 2 cars back, officer. The Attorney General's schedule is a matter of national importance." Reeves glanced in his rearview mirror and noticed another black SUV parked behind his patrol car. He could make out the shapes of men in suits watching the interaction closely. "I understand the importance of your schedule, sir," Reeves said, turning back to Morrison. "But the safety of the children in that school zone is also important." The driver was going 50 miles an hour past an elementary school during drop-off time. Morrison sighed dramatically. "Fine. Anderson, give the officer your information so we can be on our way." The driver reluctantly handed over his license and the vehicle registration. Reeves took them and walked back to his patrol car, feeling the eyes of both Morrison's team and the security detail on his back. His hands trembled slightly as he sat down. Was he really doing this? Writing up the United States Attorney General's driver, the most powerful law enforcement officer in the country? Reeves thought about his brother Tom, now working 2 part-time jobs to make ends meet after the budget cuts. He thought about Morrison's dismissive tone when questioned about the impact of those cuts on families. Reeves began entering the information into his computer. The license belonged to Robert Anderson, likely a Justice Department employee assigned to drive the Attorney General. As he worked, Reeves could see Morrison in the back seat of the SUV talking animatedly on his phone, gesturing with obvious irritation. 5 minutes passed as Reeves completed the paperwork for the citation. Then 10. He knew he was taking longer than necessary, but something about Morrison's entitled attitude rubbed him the wrong way. The sun continued to beat down, making the black SUV into something of a heat trap with its dark exterior. Finally, after 15 minutes, Reeves exited his patrol car and walked back to the SUV. Morrison had rolled his window back up, enjoying the air conditioning but lowered it again as Reeves approached. The Attorney General's face was flushed with anger. "Officer, this is absolutely unacceptable. Do you have any idea what you've done? I've missed the beginning of my meeting. There are 15 people waiting for me at the courthouse." Reeves handed the citation to Anderson. "Sir, I apologize for the inconvenience, but traffic laws apply to everyone. The fine is $250 for speeding in a school zone. Instructions for payment or contesting the ticket are on the back." "This is ridiculous," Morrison snapped. "I'll be speaking to your chief about this. What's your name and badge number?" "Officer James Reeves, badge number 4276, he replied without hesitation. "And I'm sure Chief Wilson would be happy to speak with you about the importance of school zone safety." Morrison's face turned an even darker shade of red. "You clearly have no idea how things work, Officer Reeves. There's a chain of command in this country, and you've just put yourself on the wrong side of it." The words stung, but Reeves maintained his professional demeanor. "Is there anything else I can help you with today, sir?" "You can get out of our way," Morrison said coldly. Reeves nodded and stepped back from the vehicle. "Please remind your driver to observe the posted speed limits, especially in school zones." "Have a good day, sir." As he turned to walk away, he heard Morrison mutter something that sounded like small-town cop on a power trip. The words were clearly meant for him to hear. The SUV pulled away from the curb with more force than necessary, the driver clearly angry but keeping just below the speed limit now. Reeves watched them go, a knot forming in his stomach. Had he just committed career suicide by doing his job? He got back into his patrol car and sat for a moment, replaying the encounter in his mind. Perhaps he should have let them go with a warning. Many officers would have. But the law was the law, and if he started making exceptions based on power and influence, where would it end? His radio crackled to life. "Reeves, this is dispatch. Chief wants to see you at the station ASAP." That was quick. Morrison must have placed a call immediately. 10-4 dispatch. "On my way." As he drove to the station, Reeves thought about his brother and the photo of his nieces on his refrigerator. He thought about Morrison's dismissive attitude, an entitled expectation of special treatment. And he thought about his own mortgage, which was already tight after his wife had been laid off from her teaching position due to budget cuts that people like Morrison had championed from their comfortable offices in Washington. The station came into view, a squat brick building with the American flag flying out front. Reeves parked in his usual spot and took a deep breath before getting out. Whatever came next, he'd face it knowing he'd done his job exactly as he was supposed to do. As he walked through the doors, the desk sergeant looked up with an expression Reeves couldn't quite read. "Chief's waiting for you," he said quietly. "And Reeves? You might want to brace yourself. He's got the mayor with him." Reeves nodded grimly and headed toward the chief's office, his boots suddenly feeling very heavy on the worn linoleum floor. He had a feeling this was just the beginning of what promised to be a very long day. What he didn't know was just how much his life was about to change. All because he'd decided to enforce the law equally, regardless of power or position. The door to Chief Wilson's office seemed heavier than usual as Reeves pushed it open. Inside, Chief Wilson sat behind his desk, face tight with worry. Beside him stood Mayor Patricia Jenkins, arms crossed and expression grim. Neither of them looked happy to see him. "Sit down, Reeves," the chief said, gesturing to the empty chair across from his desk. Reeves sat, back straight, hands resting on his knees. 20 years on the force had taught him when to speak and when to listen. This was definitely a time to listen. "So," Chief Wilson began, leaning forward, "want to tell me why I just got a call from the U.S. Attorney General's office? Something about you holding up the Attorney General himself in a school zone? I pulled over a speeding vehicle in the school zone on Elm Street," Reeves explained calmly. "It was going 50 in a 25. Turned out to be the Attorney General's car. I issued a citation to the driver as per procedure. The mayor sighed heavily. James, do you have any idea what kind of position this puts us in? The Attorney General of the United States. With all due respect, Mayor, the law applies equally to everyone. That SUV was flying past the elementary school during morning drop-off. I did my job, Chief Wilson rubbed his temples. Reeves, nobody's saying you didn't do your job. But there's such a thing as professional discretion. A warning would have sufficed. A warning wouldn't have been what I'd give any other driver going that fast in a school zone, Reeves countered. Sir, if we start picking and choosing who the law applies to, save the lecture, the mayor cut in. The Attorney General's office is demanding an apology. They say you were deliberately slow processing the citation, that you were disrespectful, and that you embarrassed him in public. Reeves felt heat rise in his neck. I followed procedure to the letter. If the Attorney General was embarrassed, maybe he should consider why his driver was endangering children by speeding through a school zone. The chief and mayor exchanged glances. Look, Reeves, the chief said with forced patience, we're not asking you to compromise your principles, but this is politics. The Attorney General is in town to announce a new federal courthouse project, a $50 million investment in our community. We can't afford to have him leave with a bad taste in his mouth. So what exactly are you asking me to do? The mayor stepped forward. We need you to issue a formal apology. Say you mishandled the situation, that you should have recognized the security concerns of a high-ranking official. Reeves stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. I can't do that. I didn't mishandle anything. I did my job exactly as I would for anyone else. Then we have a problem, the chief said quietly. Because if you don't apologize, they're threatening to pull the courthouse project. That's 300 jobs, Reeves. 300 families in this town who need those paychecks. The weight of those words hung in the air. Reeves thought about his brother, about all the families struggling after the recent budget cuts. He thought about his fellow officers, his neighbors, the community he'd sworn to protect. I need some time to think, he finally said. The chief nodded. Take the rest of the day. But Reeves, the Attorney General is holding a press conference at 4 p.m. It would look good if you were there to shake his hand. Reeves left without another word, the burden of the town's future seeming to rest on his shoulders. As he walked through the station, he felt the eyes of his colleagues following him. News traveled fast in a department this size. He drove home in silence, the radio off, trying to sort through his thoughts. His modest house stood quiet and empty when he arrived. His wife at her part-time job at the library, the only work she'd been able to find after the school district cuts. Reeves changed out of his uniform and sat at his kitchen table, staring at the family photos on his refrigerator, his daughter's college graduation, his son's high school football team, his brother's family at their last Christmas together. People who counted on him, who looked up to him. The phone rang, startling him from his thoughts. It was his brother Tom. Hey, big brother, Tom said when Reeves answered. Heard you had quite the morning. News is all over town already. How bad is it? Reeves asked. Depends who you ask. Half the town thinks you're a hero for standing up to the big shots. The other half thinks you're crazy for risking the courthouse project. Reeves sighed. What do you think? There was a pause. I think you did what you thought was right. Same as always. But Jim, those jobs matter. My kids need to eat. The call ended shortly after, leaving Reeves feeling more conflicted than ever. He glanced at the clock. 2:30 p.m. He had less than 2 hours to decide. At 3:45 p.m., Reeves pulled into the parking lot of City Hall, where a small crowd had gathered for the Attorney General's press conference. He'd put his uniform back on, though he wasn't on duty. If he was going to do this, he would do it as Officer Reeves, not as Jim. He spotted the Attorney General's black SUV parked in a reserved space, along with several other government vehicles. Security personnel stood at strategic points around the area, some openly watching Reeves as he approached. One of them, a tall woman with short hair and a Secret Service pin, stepped into his path. Officer Reeves, I'm Agent Cooper. The Attorney General would like a word before the press conference. Reeves nodded, his throat dry. Lead the way. She guided him through a side entrance and down a hallway to a small conference room. Inside, Attorney General Morrison sat at the head of a table, reviewing some papers. He looked up as Reeves entered, his expression unreadable. Officer Reeves, thank you for coming. Morrison dismissed Agent Cooper with a nod. When the door closed, he continued, I understand you've been given some time to reconsider your actions this morning. Reeves remained standing, hands at his sides. Yes, sir. And? Morrison raised an eyebrow. Have you prepared an apology? The moment stretched between them, taut with tension. Reeves thought of his family, his town, the 300 jobs at stake, and then he thought of his oath, of what it meant to wear the badge. Sir, with all due respect, I can't apologize for doing my job. Your driver was speeding in a school zone, putting children at risk. The citation was justified. Morrison's face hardened. I see, well, that's unfortunate. For you and for this town. He stood, straightening his tie. I had hoped we could resolve this amicably. There's nothing to resolve, sir. The law applies equally to everyone, does it? Morrison laughed without humor. Officer Reeves, let me explain something to you. There are people who make the laws, people who enforce the laws, and people who are above the laws. I think you're confused about which category I fall into. The words hit Reeves like a physical blow. No one is above the law, sir. Not even you. Morrison stepped closer, voice dropping to a near whisper. Your career is over. This town's chance at federal funding is over. And for what? Your pride? Your principles? Was it worth it? Before Reeves could respond, the door opened and Mayor Jenkins entered with a strained smile. Gentlemen, the press is ready for us. The press conference was set up in the main hall where about 30 people had gathered. Local reporters, city officials, and curious citizens. Reeves stood to one side, watching as the mayor introduced Attorney General Morrison with effusive praise. Morrison approached the podium, his public smile firmly in place. Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I'm pleased to be here in your beautiful town today. He launched into his prepared speech about justice and community partnerships, never once acknowledging Reeves's presence. The crowd applauded at appropriate moments, but Reeves could feel the undercurrent of tension. As Morrison concluded his remarks, he paused, looking directly at Reeves. Before I take questions, I'd like to address an unfortunate incident that occurred this morning. While traveling to this very event, my security detail was delayed by one of your local officers. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. While I appreciate the diligence of law enforcement, Morrison continued, his voice taking on a patronizing tone, I must express concern about the judgment shown today. When federal officials are conducting official business, particularly those with security concerns, local authorities should exercise appropriate discretion. Reeves felt all eyes turn to him. Some sympathetic, others accusing. Morrison gestured toward Reeves. Officer Reeves, I believe you have something you'd like to say? The room fell silent. This was the moment. Apologize and save the courthouse project, or stand his ground and face the consequences. Reeves stepped forward, aware of the mayor's pleading look and the chief's worried expression. He cleared his throat. Yes, I do have something to say. Morrison smiled triumphantly. This morning, I pulled over a vehicle traveling at twice the legal speed limit in a school zone. Reeves began, his voice growing stronger with each word. I didn't know who was in that vehicle. I didn't care. My job is to protect the people of this town, especially our children. No official business justifies endangering kids, and no title puts anyone above the law. The Attorney General's smile vanished. The mayor closed her eyes in defeat. If that means we lose the courthouse project, if that means I lose my job, then so be it. Reeves continued, but I won't apologize for doing what's right. A tense silence followed his words. Then from the back of the room, someone began to clap. Others joined in, the applause spreading until nearly half the room was showing their support. Morrison's face flushed with anger. He leaned into the microphone. This is precisely the kind of small-town obstinance that... He never finished the sentence. In that moment, Morrison's driver, Anderson, burst into the room, shoving past security. Sir, we need to leave now. The urgency in his voice caused immediate alarm. Morrison stepped back from the podium. What's happening? Security threat. Anderson replied quietly, but in the hushed room his words carried. Credible threat called in against you. We need to move to a secure location immediately. Chaos erupted as Morrison's security detail rushed to surround him. The crowd began to panic, people pushing toward the exits. In the confusion, Reeves noticed Anderson reaching inside his jacket, his movements strange and jerky. Years of police training kicked in. Reeves's instincts screamed a warning. That wasn't a protective move. It was the motion of someone drawing a concealed weapon. Time seemed to slow down for Reeves as he watched Anderson's hand disappear beneath his jacket. 20 years of police work had honed his instincts to razor sharpness, and right now, those instincts were screaming danger. Without hesitation, Reeves moved. He pushed through the panicking crowd, drawing his own weapon in one fluid motion. "Gun!
Everyone down!"
he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. In that moment, everything happened at once. The Attorney General's security detail swung into action, some moving to shield Morrison, others drawing their weapons and scanning for threats. The crowd scattered, screams filling the air as people ducked for cover. Anderson's hand emerged holding not a gun, but what appeared to be a communications device. His eyes widened in shock as he found himself staring down the barrel of Reeves' service weapon. "Drop it. Hands where I can see them," Reeves commanded, his stance firm, weapon steady. "It's a radio," Anderson shouted back, slowly raising his other hand while keeping the device visible. "I'm Secret Service." The real Secret Service agents had their weapons out now, too, some pointed at Anderson, others at Reeves. The standoff froze everyone in place. "Officer, lower your weapon immediately," one of the agents shouted at Reeves. "He's reaching for something," Reeves responded, not taking his eyes off Anderson. "He's one of ours," another agent called out. Attorney General Morrison, half-crouched behind the podium with two agents shielding him, peered out at the scene with a mixture of fear and rage. "What the hell is going on? Someone get that lunatic under control." The chief pushed his way forward. "Reeves, stand down." "That's an order." Sweat beaded on Reeves's forehead as his mind raced. Had he misread the situation? But Anderson wasn't wearing a Secret Service pin like the others. His movements had been erratic, suspicious. "Show me your credentials," Reeves demanded, his weapon still trained on Anderson. "For God's sake, officer," Morrison shouted, his face red with fury. "He works for me. Put that gun down before someone gets hurt." Agent Cooper stepped forward cautiously. "Officer Reeves, Robert Anderson is part of the Attorney General's advance team. He's authorized to be here. Please lower your weapon so we can sort this out." Reeves hesitated, then slowly lowered his gun, though he didn't holster it. "Let me see your ID," he said to Anderson, still not convinced. Anderson, his face tight with anger, pulled out his credentials with his free hand. "United States Secret Service on assignment to the Attorney General's protective detail. You just pulled a gun on a federal agent, officer." The tension in the room remained electric as Reeves examined the ID. It appeared legitimate, but something still felt off. Why wasn't Anderson wearing the same pin as the other agents? Why had he burst in shouting about a security threat if he was part of the protection team? Before Reeves could voice these questions, the chief grabbed his arm. "Weapon holstered now, and give me your badge and gun. You're suspended, effective immediately." The words hit Reeves like a physical blow. "Chief, something's not right here." Not another word," the chief hissed. "You just pointed your service weapon at a federal agent in a room full of witnesses. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Reeves looked around, taking in the terrified faces of the townspeople, the furious expression of the Attorney General, and the hard stares of the Secret Service agents. Even those who had applauded his speech earlier now looked at him with fear and uncertainty. Slowly, he holstered his weapon and unpinned his badge. He handed both to the chief, a hollow feeling spreading through his chest. "Get him out of here," Morrison demanded, straightening his tie as he emerged from behind the podium. "I want charges filed. Assault, reckless endangerment, threatening a federal officer, the works." Two local officers approached Reeves, faces grim but eyes sympathetic. "Come on, Jim," one of them said quietly. "Let's go." As they led him toward the exit, Reeves caught Anderson's eye. The man's expression wasn't one of fear or anger, but something that looked almost like satisfaction. He whispered something to Morrison, who nodded sharply. Outside, away from the crowd, the officers released their grip on Reeves's arms. "We don't need to cuff you, do we?" Officer Dan Parker asked, his voice low. Reeves shook his head. "No, I'll go quietly." "What happened in there, Jim?" Parker asked as they walked toward a patrol car. "I've never seen you draw down on someone like that." "I don't know," Reeves admitted. "Something about that guy didn't sit right. His movements, the way he burst in, it just triggered every alarm bell I've got." "Well, those alarm bells might have cost you your career," Parker said sadly. "They're talking federal charges, Jim. This isn't just a suspension." The reality of his situation began to sink in as Reeves sat in the back of the patrol car. 20 years of service possibly ended in 20 seconds of misjudgment. His family, his mortgage, his future, all suddenly uncertain. At the station, Reeves surrendered his remaining equipment and changed into civilian clothes. The process felt like shedding his identity piece by piece. No badge, no gun, no uniform. Just Jim Reeves, possibly soon to be ex-cop and defendant in a federal case. The chief called him into his office one more time before he left. "I don't understand what got into you." "Reeves," he said, looking older and more tired than he had that morning. "First the traffic stop, now this. It's like you're determined to self-destruct." "I was doing my job," Reeves said quietly. "Both times." The chief shook his head. "Your job is to protect and serve, not to antagonize one of the most powerful men in the country. Not to draw your weapon in a crowded room and create panic. If Anderson is really Secret Service, why wasn't he wearing the same identification as the others? Why create a false security alert? That's not for you to worry about anymore," the chief said firmly. "Go home, don't talk to the press. Don't talk to anyone, in fact. We'll let you know when the feds want to interview you." The drive home was the longest of Reeves's life. The town he'd served for 2 decades seemed to watch him with accusing eyes as he passed. Or maybe that was just his imagination. His wife, Linda, was waiting at the door when he pulled into the driveway. News traveled fast in Millfield. "Oh, Jim," she said, pulling him into a tight embrace. "What happened?" Inside, over cups of coffee that grew cold as he talked, Reeves explained everything. The morning traffic stop, the pressure to apologize, his speech at the press conference, and finally, the chaos with Anderson. Linda listened without interrupting, her face showing concern but not judgment. When he finished, she took his hands in hers. "I believe you," she said simply. "If you thought this Anderson person was a threat, then there was something wrong. Your instincts have kept you alive for 20 years on the job." Her faith in him brought unexpected tears to Reeves's eyes. "My instincts might have just destroyed our lives, Lynn. Federal charges, no pension, no references for a new job. What are we going to do?" "We'll figure it out," she said firmly. "We always do." The phone rang, interrupting their moment. Linda answered, her expression changing as she listened. "Yes, he's here." "Who may I say is calling?" She covered the mouthpiece with her hand. "It's someone named Jack Reynolds. Says he's a reporter for the Millfield Gazette." Reeves shook his head. "I'm not talking to reporters." Linda nodded and politely declined the call. No sooner had she hung up than the phone rang again. And again. After the 5th call in 10 minutes, they unplugged the landline. Reeves's cell phone wasn't much better, buzzing constantly with calls and messages. He finally turned it off, unable to deal with the barrage. As evening fell, they sat in relative silence, the TV off, avoiding the news that would surely feature Reeves's dramatic fall from grace. Their daughter called from college, having heard rumors online. Their son texted from his friend's house asking if he should come home. Reeves assured them both that things would be okay, a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. Just after 9, a knock at the door startled them both. Linda peered through the curtains. "There's a car I don't recognize in the driveway," she whispered. "A man in a suit." Reeves's stomach tightened. "Probably the feds coming to formally charge me." He opened the door to find a tall, lean man with graying hair standing on his porch. Not Anderson, not anyone he recognized from the chaotic scene at City Hall. "Mr. Reeves?" the man asked. "My name is Michael Harrison. I'm with the FBI's Internal Affairs Division. May I come in?" Confused, Reeves stepped aside to let him enter. The FBI investigating a local police officer seemed excessive, even for pointing a gun at a federal agent. "Sir, I'm not sure why the FBI would be involved in my case," Reeves said as they sat in the living room. Harrison's expression remained neutral. "Actually, Mr. Reeves, I'm not here about you. I'm here about Robert Anderson and William Morrison." Linda gasped softly beside him. Reeves leaned forward, a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. "What about them?" Harrison placed a file on the coffee table between them. "What I'm about to tell you is part of an ongoing federal investigation. Nothing leaves this room, understood?" Reeves and Linda both nodded. "Robert Anderson is not Secret Service," Harrison said, opening the file to reveal a photograph of Anderson in civilian clothes, meeting with unknown men. "And your instincts at City Hall were correct. He was reaching for a weapon." Reeves stared at the FBI agent, trying to process what he'd just heard. The living room suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. "If Anderson isn't Secret Service, then who is he?" Reeves asked, leaning forward to examine the photograph more closely. Harrison slid another photo across the table. This one showed Anderson in conversation with men whose faces were blurred out, except for one, Attorney General Morrison. Robert Anderson is Morrison's personal fixer, Harrison explained. Officially, he's listed as a special advisor to the Attorney General. Unofficially, he handles problems that Morrison doesn't want on the record. Linda's hand found Reeves's shoulder, squeezing gently, but he had credentials. Jim saw them. Fake, Harrison said simply. Good ones, too. Would have fooled most people, but they wouldn't stand up to close scrutiny, which is why he was so quick to put them away. Reeves felt a mix of vindication and growing unease. So when I drew my weapon, you were right to be concerned, Harrison confirmed. Anderson was reaching for a gun, not to use it necessarily, probably just to discreetly hand it to one of the actual agents. He's not supposed to be armed in his official capacity. Why are you telling me this? Reeves asked. If this is part of a federal investigation, why share it with a suspended local cop? Harrison closed the file folder. Because we need your help, Mr. Reeves. The FBI has been investigating Morrison for months. We believe he's involved in a scheme to direct federal construction contracts to companies that pay him kickbacks. The courthouse project in your town is part of it. The revelation hit Reeves like a physical blow. The $50 million project, the 300 jobs, all potentially part of a corruption scheme. You've inadvertently inserted yourself into our investigation, Harrison continued. First with the traffic stop, then with your speech at City Hall, and finally by confronting Anderson. Morrison is rattled. He's making mistakes, and that gives us an opportunity. Linda shook her head. Wait, you're not asking Jim to get involved in this, are you? He's already lost his badge. They're talking about pressing federal charges against him. Harrison nodded sympathetically. I understand your concern, Mrs. Reeves, but those charges would disappear if your husband helps us. And if Morrison goes down, Jim would be reinstated with full back pay and benefits. Reeves ran a hand through his hair. What exactly would you need me to do? Nothing illegal, nothing dangerous, Harrison assured him. We just need you to be visible. Keep the pressure on. Morrison thinks you're a problem, a loose cannon who might expose him. We want him to keep thinking that. And how does that help your investigation? Harrison's expression was calculated. When people feel threatened, they take steps to protect themselves. They make calls they shouldn't make, move money they shouldn't move, meet with people they shouldn't meet, all of which gives us evidence. The phone they'd plugged back in rang, suddenly making them all jump. Linda answered, then held out the receiver to Reeves. It's your brother. Reeves took the phone. Tom, now's not a great time. Jim, you need to turn on the news, his brother said urgently. They're talking about you and the Attorney General. There's video. Reeves thanked him and hung up, then reached for the remote. The three of them watched in silence as the local news showed cell phone footage of the confrontation at City Hall. The shaky video showed Reeves drawing his weapon and shouting for people to get down, followed by the standoff with Anderson. The anchor's voice was grave. Local police officer James Reeves, who earlier today had been involved in a controversial traffic stop of Attorney General Morrison's motorcade, is now at the center of what some are calling an attempted assault on a federal officer. The Attorney General's office has released a statement condemning Officer Reeves's actions and calling for criminal charges. Harrison turned off the TV. This is exactly what we need. Morrison is using his position to publicly attack you. It makes him look vindictive, especially to the locals who know your reputation. But it's destroying Jim's life, Linda protested. Temporarily, Harrison said. If we succeed, your husband will be vindicated. If we fail. He let the sentence hang unfinished in the air. Reeves stood up and walked to the window, looking out at his quiet street. His whole adult life had been defined by being a police officer. Now that identity was in jeopardy, his reputation under attack. But if what Harrison said was true, he'd been right all along. About Morrison, about Anderson, about all of it. What about the chief? The mayor? Reeves asked, turning back to Harrison. They think I've lost my mind. We can't tell them the truth, not yet. The fewer people who know about this investigation, the better. So I just take the punishment? Let everyone believe I'm some kind of loose cannon? Harrison nodded soberly. For now, I know it's a lot to ask. Reeves exchanged a long look with Linda. After 20 years of marriage, they could have entire conversations without saying a word. She was worried, scared even, but she also knew how important his principles were to him. I'll do it, Reeves decided. But I need something from you first. Name it, Harrison said. Proof. Real proof that Morrison is corrupt. I'm not going to help you destroy a man's career based on your word alone, even if he is trying to destroy mine. Harrison hesitated, then reached inside his jacket and pulled out a small USB drive. This contains financial records linking Morrison to shell companies that received contracts from the Justice Department. It also has recordings of phone calls between Morrison and contractors discussing kickbacks. We were going to use this to get a warrant, but you can listen to it first. An hour later, after reviewing enough of the evidence to be convinced, Reeves agreed to Harrison's plan. The FBI agent left them with a secure phone number to contact him and a promise that this would all be over soon. Do you think we can trust him? Linda asked after Harrison had gone. Reeves sighed. I don't know, but the evidence seems real, and if Morrison is corrupt, he needs to be stopped. The next morning brought new challenges. Reporters had camped out at the end of their driveway, calling out questions whenever anyone came into view. Neighbors drove by slowly, curiosity and judgment in their eyes. Reeves's son came home from his friend's house, upset and confused by what he'd seen online about his father. Just before noon, Reeves received a call from his union representative. The department is moving to terminate your employment, she told him grimly, and the DA is considering local charges in addition to whatever the feds might bring. This is serious, Jim. I know, he replied, the words feeling inadequate. What should I do? Get a good lawyer, and maybe think about a public apology. Try to get out ahead of this. Reeves thanked her and hung up, knowing an apology wasn't part of Harrison's plan. He needed to keep the pressure on Morrison, not back down. As the day wore on, Reeves found himself checking the news obsessively. Every outlet seemed to be covering the story, though with different angles. National news portrayed him as an out-of-control cop with a grudge. Local coverage was more nuanced, with some reporters highlighting his spotless 20-year record. By evening, the story had evolved. Someone had leaked information about the morning traffic stop, and now commentators were speculating about whether Reeves had targeted the Attorney General deliberately. Some suggested he might have political motivations or personal grievances against Morrison's policies. They're making you into some kind of anti-government extremist, Linda said worriedly as they watched the coverage. Reeves shook his head. That's not who I am. Anyone in this town could tell them that. As if on cue, the secure phone Harrison had left them rang. Reeves answered cautiously. Turn on Channel 7, Harrison said without preamble. Your neighbors are speaking up. They switched to the local channel to find a reporter interviewing people on Millfield's main street. To Reeves's surprise, many were defending him. Jim Reeves coached my son's Little League team for 5 years, one man was saying. He's the most level-headed guy I know. If he thought someone was a threat, I believe him. Another resident, an elderly woman Reeves recognized from his neighborhood, spoke directly to the camera. Officer Reeves helped me when my house was broken into last year. He sat with me for hours, made sure I felt safe again. That's who he is. Not this monster they're making him out to be. The segment ended with a statement from Reeves's fellow officers, who, while not directly contradicting the department's official position, spoke highly of his character and service record. See? Linda said, a hint of hope in her voice. People know who you really are. The moment of encouragement was short-lived. The next story showed Attorney General Morrison at a hastily arranged press conference in Washington, his expression stern. What happened in Millfield was not just an attack on me or my staff, Morrison declared. It was an attack on the rule of law itself. When local officers take it upon themselves to harass and threaten federal officials conducting official business, they undermine the very foundations of our legal system. He went on to announce that the Justice Department would be conducting a full review of the Millfield Police Department, looking for patterns of misconduct and anti-government bias. He's using his position to launch a witch hunt against your entire department, Linda said incredulously. Reeves felt a cold knot of guilt in his stomach. His colleagues, his friends, were now in Morrison's crosshairs because of him. The secure phone rang again. Did you see that? Harrison asked when Reeves answered. I saw it. He's going after my whole department now. This is good, Harrison said, his voice eager. He's overreaching, abusing his power publicly. Our surveillance picked up a call right after the press conference. Morrison contacted one of the shell companies. He's moving money around, trying to hide the paper trail before the department review brings unwanted attention. So how much longer does this need to go on? Reeves asked, watching his wife's worried face. Not much longer, Harrison promised. We're close. But there's been a new development. We've uncovered evidence that Morrison's corruption goes beyond kickbacks. There are connections to a land development scheme in your town. Properties being bought up through shell companies just before the courthouse announcement. One of those properties is on your street, actually. Reeves froze. The old Wilson place? It sold last month to some out-of-town investment group. Exactly, Harrison confirmed. Morrison's been playing a long game. The courthouse project isn't just about kickbacks from construction. It's about property values skyrocketing once the project is announced. And my traffic stop threatened to derail the whole thing, Reeves said, the pieces falling into place. Precisely, which is why he came down so hard on you. You're not just an annoyance to him. You're a threat to a multi-million-dollar scheme. 2 weeks passed, each day bringing new challenges for Reeves and his family. The reporters eventually thinned out, finding fresher stories to chase, but the stares and whispers in town continued. Some neighbors crossed the street to avoid talking to him. Others went out of their way to offer support, dropping off home-cooked meals or simply stopping by to chat, making it clear they still believed in him. The hardest part was the silence from the police department. Apart from the union representative's calls and occasional text messages from Officer Parker, his colleagues had been instructed not to contact him during the investigation. 20 years of brotherhood severed by a single incident. It was a cool Tuesday morning when Harrison called the secure line again. We're moving tonight, the FBI agent said without preamble. I need you to come to the Holiday Inn on Route 16, room 213. Come alone, 7 p.m. sharp. What's happening? Reeves asked. We've got enough to move on Morrison, but there's something I need you to see first. Something that changes the game entirely. Reeves agreed to the meeting, a mix of hope and anxiety churning in his stomach. Could this nightmare finally be ending? He told Linda about the meeting, watching her face cycle through concern, hope, and determination. I'm coming with you, she said firmly. Reeves shook his head. Harrison said to come alone. I don't care what he said. This affects our family, our future. I have a right to be there. After 20 years of marriage, Reeves knew better than to argue when Linda used that tone. Together they drove to the Holiday Inn, arriving exactly at 7 p.m. Room 213 was at the end of a long hallway, far from the elevator and ice machines. Reeves knocked softly. Harrison opened the door, his expression darkening when he saw Linda. I said come alone. My wife has a right to hear whatever you're going to tell me, Reeves said, standing his ground. After a moment of tension, Harrison stepped aside to let them in. The room was standard hotel fare. Beige walls, generic artwork, a king-sized bed, and a small table with 2 chairs by the window. What wasn't standard were the files, laptops, and surveillance equipment spread across every surface. Another man sat at the table, older than Harrison with salt and pepper hair, and the weathered look of someone who'd seen too much in his career. This is Deputy Director Wilson, Harrison said. He's overseeing the Morrison investigation. Wilson didn't stand or offer to shake hands. You've put us in a difficult position, Officer Reeves. Ex-officer, Reeves corrected bitterly. Not for long. If all goes well tonight, Wilson replied. Harrison gestured for them to sit on the edge of the bed, the only space not covered with equipment or papers. We have enough evidence to arrest Morrison, Harrison explained, but we've uncovered something bigger. The land deals in Millfield are just the tip of the iceberg. Morrison has been running this scheme in 6 different states. Always the same pattern. Announce a federal project, watch property values soar, then cash in through his shell companies. We're talking about tens of millions in illegal profits, Wilson added. So why haven't you arrested him yet? Linda asked. Wilson and Harrison exchanged glances. Because Morrison is just the public face, Wilson said. We have evidence that he's working with someone much bigger. Someone whose name doesn't appear on any of the paperwork, but who takes a cut of every deal. Harrison pulled a laptop forward and turned it to face them. On the screen was a photograph of Morrison meeting with a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, silver-haired and impeccably dressed. Something about him seemed vaguely familiar to Reeves, though he couldn't place where he might have seen him before. Senator Howard Reynolds, Harrison said, chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee and the man who recommended Morrison for Attorney General in the first place. Linda gasped softly beside him. Reynolds was a household name, one of the most powerful men in Washington, often mentioned as a future presidential candidate. We believe Reynolds has been the mastermind all along, Wilson continued, using Morrison as his frontman while he rakes in millions from these land deals. Reeves tried to process the implications. So this goes all the way to the Senate? How does that involve me? Harrison closed the laptop. Morrison is coming back to Millfield tomorrow to officially cancel the courthouse project. He's claiming that the hostile local environment makes it impossible to proceed. The real reason is that your traffic stop and the subsequent attention have made it too risky. He's cutting his losses, Wilson added, but we can't let him walk away. We need to catch him and Reynolds together, discussing the scheme explicitly. That's where you come in. A cold feeling spread through Reeves's chest. What exactly are you asking me to do? Nothing illegal, Harrison assured him quickly. Morrison is holding a private meeting at the Millfield Grand Hotel tomorrow night, with local officials to discuss the cancellation. We've intercepted communications indicating that Reynolds will be there too, though his name isn't on any official schedule. We need you to confront Morrison again publicly. You want to use my husband as bait? Linda asked incredulously. Wilson's expression remained impassive. We need Morrison rattled again. When Reeves confronts him, Morrison will almost certainly retreat to his hotel suite to regroup. That's when he'll contact Reynolds. We'll be listening in, and we'll have video surveillance. If we get them discussing the real reason for canceling the project, explicitly mentioning the land deals, we've got them both. Reeves stood up and paced the small area of free floor space. And if I do this, all charges against me are dropped? I get my job back? Full reinstatement, back pay, and a clean record, Wilson confirmed. We'll make it clear publicly that you were assisting a federal investigation. And if something goes wrong? Linda asked. If Morrison doesn't take the bait or if this Reynolds person isn't even there? Harrison and Wilson exchanged another look. Then we still arrest Morrison based on the evidence we have, Harrison said. But without Reynolds, the bigger conspiracy remains intact. Morrison becomes the fall guy. Reynolds walks free and the scheme continues with someone else in Morrison's place. The weight of the decision pressed down on Reeves. This was bigger than his job now, bigger than his reputation in town. This was about stopping corruption at the highest levels of government. I'll do it, he said finally, but I want something in writing about my reinstatement. Wilson nodded. Already prepared. He slid a document across the table. Full immunity for any actions taken during the course of assisting our investigation, plus guaranteed reinstatement. The next day passed in a blur of preparations. Harrison briefed Reeves on exactly what to say, where to stand, how to provoke Morrison without alerting him to the trap. Linda spent the day alternating between anxiety and fierce pride in her husband's courage. By evening, Reeves found himself standing in the lobby of the Millfield Grand Hotel, watching as town officials and business leaders gathered for Morrison's announcement. He wore civilian clothes, jeans and a button-down shirt, but stood, tall with the posture of a man who'd spent 2 decades in uniform. He spotted Chief Wilson and Mayor Jenkins near the front of the small crowd, their expressions tense. They hadn't been told about the FBI operation. As far as they knew, Reeves was still a disgraced officer facing potential charges. At precisely 7 p.m., Morrison entered with his entourage, Anderson conspicuously absent. The Attorney General looked confident, almost smug as he approached the small podium that had been set up. His eyes swept the crowd and then locked on Reeves. The flash of anger that crossed Morrison's face was impossible to miss. He leaned over and whispered something to an aide, who immediately approached the hotel security staff. Before they could reach him, Reeves stepped forward. "Mr. Attorney General," he called out, his voice clear and steady. "Before you cancel this project, don't the people of Millfield deserve to know the real reason? Don't they deserve to know about the land deals?" A shocked murmur ran through the crowd. Morrison's face reddened. "Remove that man immediately," he ordered the security guards who now flanked Reeves. The old Wilson property, the abandoned factory on River Street, the empty lot behind the high school. Reeves continued as the guards took his arms. "All bought up by shell companies before your announcement. Companies linked to you and Senator Reynolds." The mention of Reynolds' name hit Morrison like a physical blow. His composed facade cracked, revealing naked panic beneath. "Get him out of here," Morrison shouted. This man is delusional. He's facing federal charges for assaulting my staff. As security escorted Reeves from the ballroom, he caught the chief's eye. The older man's expression was a mix of disappointment and confusion. Reeves gave him a slight nod, a silent request for trust that he hoped his old friend would understand. In the lobby, the security guards released Reeves with a warning not to return. He walked outside to the parking lot where Harrison waited in an unmarked car, listening through an earpiece. He took the bait, Harrison said as Reeves slid into the passenger seat. He's heading to his suite now and he's made a call. We're recording everything. For the next hour, they sat in tense silence, Harrison occasionally relaying updates from the team monitoring the surveillance equipment. Finally, his expression changed, a slow smile spreading across his face. We got them, he said, removing the earpiece. Morrison called Reynolds directly. They discussed the shell companies, the land deals, everything. Reynolds is furious about the canceled project. Apparently, he had investors expecting big returns. It's all on tape. Relief washed over Reeves. So it's over? Almost. The arrest teams are moving in now. Morrison at the hotel, Reynolds at the private airstrip where his plane is waiting. Harrison started the car. Let's get you home to your wife. Tomorrow's going to be a busy day. The next morning, Reeves woke to news alerts on his phone. The headlines were stunning. Attorney General arrested in corruption scandal. Senator Reynolds taken into custody. Massive real estate fraud uncovered by noon. The story had expanded to include Reeves's role in the investigation. His phone rang constantly. Reporters, friends, fellow officers all wanting to hear his side of the story. The most important call came from Chief Wilson just after lunch. You set me up, Reeves, the chief said, though there was no anger in his voice. Made me think you'd lost your mind when all along you were working with the feds. I couldn't tell you, Chief, orders from the FBI. There was a pause, then a sigh. Well, I just got off the phone with the FBI deputy director. He explained everything. Your badge and gun are waiting for you at the station whenever you're ready to come back. Thank you, Chief, Reeves said, emotion tightening his throat. Don't thank me. You did a brave thing standing up to power like that. Not many would have had the courage. Later that afternoon, Reeves stood in front of the Millfield Police Department, Linda by his side. Reporters had gathered, cameras flashing as he approached the steps where the chief, the mayor, and his fellow officers waited. Chief Wilson stepped forward, holding out Reeves's badge and gun. Officer James Reeves, on behalf of the Millfield Police Department and the entire town, I'd like to formally reinstate you to active duty. As Reeves accepted the badge, pinning it to his chest where it had rested for 20 years, he felt a sense of rightness, of justice served. I just did my job, he told the assembled reporters when they asked how it felt to bring down such powerful figures. The law applies equally to everyone, from ordinary citizens to the highest officials in government. No one is above it, and no one is beneath it. In the weeks that followed, as Morrison and Reynolds faced trial, and the details of their scheme became public, Reeves received letters from police officers across the country, thanking him for standing up for the integrity of the badge. The courthouse project was restarted under new, legitimate oversight. The town of Millfield became something of a tourist attraction, with visitors wanting to see where an ordinary cop had taken down the corrupt attorney general. But for Reeves, the greatest reward was simpler, the knowledge that he had stayed true to his oath, his principles, and himself. As he returned to his regular patrol routes, nodding to familiar faces and watching over the community he loved, he carried that certainty like a shield. In the end, destiny had indeed hit back. Not with vengeance or retribution, but with something far more powerful: justice.